Well, we turn to our catechism question. It's question number 74, which really begins with the issue of the subject of the sacraments, or the ordinances as we would call them. And it's question 74 in our catechism. We're coming close to the end. There's only 82 questions, so we're coming close to the end and then we'll just begin again for the fourth time. This is nearly the third time we've gone through now these questions. So question 74. How do baptism and the Lord's Supper become effectual means of grace? Answer. Baptism and the Lord's Supper become effectual means of grace, not from any virtue in them or in him who does administer them, but only by the blessing of Christ and the working of the Spirit in those who by faith receive them. And we really have 4 points here that we want to briefly address. First, what they are. Secondly, in what sense they are not a means of grace. Thirdly, in what sense they are a means of grace. And then fourthly, in who they are that means of grace. First of all, what they are. Simply, they are a means of grace. They are a way which God gives to us the grace of salvation. Not that, as we go on to see, that in themselves they have this grace, but this is how God shows and signifies and declares unto us that we are His people and we are His under the covenant of redemption and the covenant of grace. In what sense they are not a means of grace? It says, not from any virtue in them or in him who does administer them. Now we know in both of these ways Roman Catholicism has so badly erred, so badly gone astray, because not only do they say there's virtue in the sacraments themselves, in and of themselves, they also say there's virtue in the one who administers them, and by this twofold virtue we receive the grace of God. In fact, as we know, they don't even understand what the grace of God actually means anyway, so even in that sense they are wrong. We don't say that to be ungracious, but we say that to be truthful regarding Rome's view regarding these things. So we do believe the sacraments are means of grace, but only insofar as they declare unto us what the Word of God communicates to us through these ordinances or sacraments. So therefore we read in the Word of God, so neither is he, this 1 Corinthians 3 verse 7, so then neither is he that planted anything, neither he that watereth, but God that giveth the increase. And 1 Peter 3:21, the like figure whereunto even baptism doth also now save us, not the putting away of the filth of the flesh. In other words, what he's saying is there, not by any physical act does this salvation happen, but the answer of a good conscience toward God by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Our third point, in what sense they are a means of grace. It says, but only by the blessing of Christ and the working of the Spirit. Only by the blessing of Christ and by the working of the Spirit of God. We read in 1 Corinthians 3 verse 6, I have planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. That's why we were praying, weren't we? Even as our meeting began. We come to this meeting, but we do so in prayer, asking God to bless. We can do everything right. We can do the ordinances right. We can preach the Word of God right. We can pray right. We can sing right. Everything can be right. But unless God gives the increase, and that's not just increase numerically, that is increase spiritually, unless God does that, all that we do is in vain. So, they are a means of grace only by the blessing of Christ and the working of the Spirit. And then finally, in who they are a means of grace. In those who by faith receive them. And we read in 1 Corinthians 12:13, by one Spirit we are all baptized into one body, whether we be Jews or Gentiles, whether we be bond or free, we have been all made to drink into one Spirit. No free will there. We have been all made to drink into one Spirit. The effectual grace of God. The effectual grace and salvation of God. So how do baptism and the Lord's Supper become effectual means of grace? Baptism and the Lord's Supper become effectual means of grace, not from any virtue in them or in him who does administer them, but only by the blessing of Christ and the working of the Spirit in those who by faith receive them.